She simply didn't think that it applied to the United States.
That is the argument that's generally used by most legislators, and that the majority did vote for it.
Right.
Yes.
So they use that argument, and it really doesn't apply to American citizens. But so that
We'll see.
We need to sharpen our pencil on that.
Yeah. Well,
They know better.
we've already. I mean, we've done the analysis. Several other groups have done the analysis as well. And when we get to the shred the NDAA part, I'm going to read some very specific sections before we dump
So
it in the
does
shredder.
the NDAA cover things like the drones and the renditions and all of that, or is that done under the CIA, or is that?
I don't believe those are covered under the NDAA. Those probably are separate policies,
I see, yeah.
initiatives that fall into different areas of the government. But
I mean, I don't think those are constitutional either, but that's another story.
To answer this question, I believe when they were debating this in the Senate, Senate 11, tried to say exempt American citizens, and they struck that out of the section. So they know, so that by implication is that it does include American citizens.
well, there were several amendments that were proposed that said supposedly we're going to fix this problem. Some of them, there was all but one that actually would have fixed the problem. I'm sorry, there was one out of all of them that were proposed that would have fixed this problem. It was the Smith-Amash Amendment, if I'm correct, Dan.
Right.
That would have fixed this, and it was voted down. So I mean,
this-
it's clear they want this ability.
I got another question. In the Hedges versus Obama, Hedges made a statement in one of the public, before the press, that he thought they did this in order to cover themselves because they probably already have an American that they have arrested without due process.
We have,
most
Has
certainly.
well,
anybody asked the Freedom of Information Act to see if they do have somebody?
well, I'll say a couple things. One, we,
Well, on a police level,
On a police
so I
level?
guess it's
Kind of.
yeah, we
like I'm thinking about Brandon Rock, and
maybe,
I think that was police level.
yeah. Well, in order to, my logic tells me that they could potentially already be using this. Nobody knows for sure, because if you were to file a Freedom of Information Act, they would claim national security. We don't have to give you the documents anyway. So we could be doing something in secret, but we're not even going to tell you if we could potentially be doing something. So it's a big circular.
Yeah, the thing is, if somebody gets arrested under this NDAA, they could be swept into the FISA court and you'll never know anything about it, which is a secret court.
Which is exactly why
We're all here.
This is exactly why we need to build this, because after we get this legislation passed, and everyone in Massachusetts is aware of what's going on, PANDA is going to be building what they call rapid response teams. And that's essentially, if you disappear, it's not going to go unnoticed. You know, it's not going to go unnoticed. And in passing this legislation in Massachusetts gives us the foundation to build on and to start to begin to challenge what they're coming in here and trying to do. So,
In Massachusetts, there has to be a case or controversy, meaning that if you don't know the identity of the person, you can't bring an advisory, you can't bring a suit, produce a body, habeas corpus or whatever, because nobody will know. Yeah, maybe they'll know a few activists, but they won't know anybody else. Is there a way around that? And that also applies at the federal level.
sure you're not being detained. But what we can do is we can provide an extreme deterrent against that happening. That makes sense?
It makes sense, though I think it's probably unenforceable again. Maybe because if we notice somebody is missing, that doesn't mean that under very difficult circumstances, that they will just take somebody without any due process. I'm very cognizant of due process here. South America, a long time ago, they had the hit squads and all the rest of it. But if you don't know, if you don't control the politician at the top, which maybe you'll be trying to, unless there is something that triggers it and forces them to disclose, yes, we have John Doe, then it's all for naught. Quite frankly, we should have a mechanism, but I don't know how we're going to get around that problem.
And it kind of goes back to the larger problem of all of this. The NDAA is part of a big pie. Because a lot of you guys in this room kind of know America's in trouble. And the NDAA is a small slice of this pie. But eventually, we want America to be restored to what we call constitutional governance and working within the bounds of the Constitution. And until that point, you really, and even at that point, you can't guarantee someone's not going to be indefinitely detained. The only thing you really can do, as you're talking about, the only thing you really can do is you can provide as much of a deterrent as possible, and you can get the press on them, and you can get, because they don't want this to get in the press. Imagine if Fox News, MSNBC, and ABC all on 1 week covered the NDAA for that entire week. It'd be gone.
Or
There'd
actually
be national outrage.
covered people that have been taken away, let's say, yeah.
Exactly, so there'd be national outrage.
That-
And we want we want that deterrent of the media to the government to be there. And if 400 people, 300 people show up at a city council meeting demanding answers, that local media is going to cover it. Maybe not national media, but local media is. And all we can do is raise awareness on this so that there's enough people angry about this and that all politicians are political animals, as it were. And if they see the tide turning against them, and most of them are not principled, but if they see the tide turning against them, then they are more likely to not do that again, or B, just kind of try to slide that person back into society without anybody paying any attention.
Would you consider something definitely unconstitutional, but saying that the chief executive cannot pardon somebody? Now, that would throw it into the Supreme Judicial Court, the SJC, and get the activity from there. Can your bill be amended at this point in time to allow for something like that? That would force it into the SJC.
As far as not pardoning, are you talking about the pardoning question you had asked before?
Yes.
Okay,
Specifically
well,
here in
pardoning-
Massachusetts, right? You're saying?
The
Yes, I'm
pardoning-
saying in Massachusetts, federally, Obama is not going to pardon, or is going to pardon. Current governor might be in that administration, it was speculated at one point in time, but he might want to follow suit.
Right, now, the pardoning question, I'm not particularly certain. In Massachusetts, if someone is pardoned, does that pardon all of the penalties, or does that just
Well, in addition to people showing up at the city council meeting,
Could we have more of an explanation, because I don't know if anyone, I'm lost here, because it's like certain people having a conversation, and I don't think,
I think it would be helpful
I
to
don't
give,
think we've had a description yet.
give like a 1-minute summary of what each of these offending sections does. I think it would be very helpful, just to
Well-
get everybody on the same page, yeah.
we are gonna go over that when we get to the,
Okay.
to shred. We're actually gonna shred the sections.
Oh,
But I think now, one thing I want to say is, in addition to people showing up at city council meetings and alerting city council, how would the local police department handle 200 kidnapping reports? 200 people calling and reporting somebody kidnapped or missing, filing a missing persons report, things of that nature. So that's just one more way that we can bring pressure to the local level to force their hand and tell them, you can't just come take somebody and have nobody notice, sweep it under the rug. But as far as to kind of broaden the scope but now you were asking specifically about the NDAA kind of in general? Yes, I mean as far as the,
Well, it seems like a lot of these discussions are getting into intricacies that I know I'm not clear on. And I wanted to know, you said there were 2 parts of the NDAA that you're going after.
2 sections, right?
Yeah, I don't know what those are.
We'll read those off.
Yeah, I would, why don't you just answer her question? I mean, we can shut them later, we can talk about these.
All right.
Talk about these tonight.
Repeating something doesn't work.
Repeating something, what is that?
It's taken long.
I mean, I could have studied this beforehand, but I've been busy on other things, so.
That's why.
I just found out about this on Friday.
If you go to the national website, there's
Well, then, that's
click on
fine.
videos, there's a 20-minute video that's really
That's
good.
fine, but if we're here, we came here, so
I don't know.
sitting here
I don't
listening to the discussion between 2 individuals that are on the same wavelength, and the rest of us are.
We'll get it read off, for sure. We'll go
Yeah,
through
good
it.
point, yeah. I think we came in assuming that people kind of had that under their belt already, and that was a mistake. We'll
You
take
didn't
that.
do your homework.
Yeah.
I know, I admitted it. I've been busy.
Well, I wasn't told to do homework. I got an announcement that came from the Bill of Rights Defense Committee, and it didn't even have a link to your website, so, it was not, and I sort of knew vaguely what the NDAA was.
Well, before you all leave, you'll be clear on it. Yes.
You're making the assumption that one person's going to be successful. What if there's a massive detention? I realize that they've targeted people specifically so far. But what if there's a mass sweep? I mean, I don't know what initiated this, and I don't know what's in their mind. And supposing there's a mass roundup of activists, and supposing there's a mass roundup as opposed to one person being detained, and there is no pardon.
In that case, we're going to have to hope that people follow their oaths and don't obey unlawful orders, like what happened in Germany. I mean,
Well,
at some point, we're going to have to,
If a massive amount of people get rounded up, I think the press is going to notice that, and it's going to be, attention will be brought to it. I don't think there's any.
What press are you talking?
Well, even the lamestream media, or as one of my friends puts it, the Wall Street media, all the news that's fixed to print. If a bunch of people, if let's say the Boston area, all of a sudden 100 people disappear, I think that's going to get picked up. I really do. I mean, unless they've got, unless you guys think, and then, listen, unless you guys think they've got the press in their back pockets, which I suppose is possible.
Yes, yes.
I will admit the press ain't what it used to be. There's no question about that. Things.
There was a CIA directive that did state that, yes, they do have the press in our back pocket.
Okay. Yep.
I didn't know we were gonna have those facilities, so we'll probably.
How do you explain then people like Matt Taibbi who speaks his mind? I mean, people like that will notice.
Well,
They don't cover that.
here's one thing, a lot of times you'll see the press talking about bad news with little or no way of figuring out what to do about it.
Yep.
So yes, people even, progressive or right-wing organizations will talk about, oh, this horrible thing happened, but nobody can figure out what to do about it, so the press doesn't talk about it.
Now, I will say that I wish I could wave a magic wand and say, nope, nobody's ever gonna get detained under the NDAA, never. And then we'll definitely be able to get everybody back. The fact of the matter is we can't wave a magic wand. This bill and these resolutions are the first step to give us a foundation to build on, to challenge this. As much as I'm an idealist, I'm a realist. If the federal government wants to come take you, they're going to take you. All we can do is put things in place to try to get you back. To make sure that if they come get you, they're not able to just sweep that story under the rug.
Ben,
Yes.
a quick interjection. There was a case in Virginia about a year and a half ago where a gentleman was taken just like this. He made some comments on Facebook that were sort of a little bit too nationalistic, and he just disappeared. And they didn't tell his family where they took him. All they know is the government came to his house, and they started a campaign on Facebook and YouTube and got the local legislators involved. And so finally, they ended up, the federal government said that they'd taken him for psychological evaluations.
Oh, Jesus.
And, what's that?
He was a veteran, wasn't
He was a veteran, and he was
Yes.
a veteran. And they kept him for about 2 months, and didn't tell the family, his sister, his mother, anybody where he was. And they finally, through the local law enforcement, they were able to get him back. So to think that it doesn't happen is simply naive. Now,
Right.
you know, is there a legislative way to make sure that it doesn't happen? No, but it speaks to what you're talking about. You know, you have to exert some sort of pressure in order to get results, and that's exactly what he did.
Check, because you have to think about it. If nobody did make a stink about his disappearance,
And I'm
he
one
might
in
still
my
be sitting there
town.
today.
In my town, I'm probably the only one out of 30,000 people that know about that story. You know, in Boston, there may be 700 people, you know.
We need to make sure it's everybody.
Yep.
Or do the best we can to wake people up here in
For
Mass.
that, we found out there were more and more.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there were a few others. The families weren't nearly as vocal. One guy lived by himself, and I don't know, I never saw the outcome of that, but I know he was taken as well. You know, it happens, you know.
Right. Do you know the names of any of these people? So
If you give me your email address, I'll email you the YouTube video on it.
Yeah, I just had a question about the 2013 NDAA. Actually, I believe it has something which amended sections 1021 and 1022. But Justin Amash, who's representative for Michigan, said that it actually doesn't undo the indefinite detention, but others say it does. Is this just politicians trying to give themselves wiggle room, or what are we going to do about that?
The language that they use is very misleading, purposely.
Of course, yeah.
Which is exactly why any legislator you talk to who voted for it say, well, no, it doesn't apply to you. It doesn't let them do that here. I mean, it goes to show you that even the legislators that are reading it are confused by it.
And that's, excuse me.
It was not fixed though. Bottom line, it was not fixed.
That is a strategy certainly be used by people to say, oh, you don't need this. But this just reaffirms it. If everybody agrees that we need trial by jury, then let's just reaffirm that here, so there's no ambiguity.
To explain sections 1021 and 1022, we're going to bring up the resident expert, Dan Johnson, who happens to be in the room. He came from Ohio, I believe, right? He's with us today. So, I'm going to let Benjamin give him a quick formal introduction, and I'm also going to correct a mistake I've made. I forgot to say who I was at the beginning. My name is Rich O'Coin. I am the Deputy Director of PANDA, Massachusetts. So Benjamin's going to now introduce Dan, and then after we find out what 1021 and 1022 actually say, we're going to shred them.
All right.
So, Dan Johnson, the founder of PANDA, woke up to the NDAA and kind of like me, said no way.
on New Year's Day, or
But he decided to take action. And he decided to start a grassroots nationwide organization to fight this at every level across the country. And he took the time out of his busy schedule to come here and be with us today. So thank you, Dan.
I've been doing this long enough, I probably should be able to to handle that. Thank you so much for the Massachusetts team for bringing me up here. They flew me out. I was just in New York speaking up at Nazareth College, then came down, attended one of their rallies, and they invited me to come up speak today. Turns out things were able to work out that I was able to come speak today. A few thank yous are necessary. I have to first and foremost thank the Patriot Coalition. They have been our legal minds behind PANDA. They've written up the resolutions, they've written up the legislation. They've really been a driving force behind a young man. I'm 19 years old, and so having some people who are much, much older than I am kind of gave PANDA the impetus and the drive. We are now one of the fastest growing liberty movements in the entire United States. We reach 1.5 million people, 1.2 million people-ish, depending on the press release we send out. And we're fighting the NDAA. So I want to talk about a little bit of how I got started, a little bit of what got me involved. I'm going to go through the sections, talk about a few more things, and then we'll go on to the shredding of these dangerous sections. So I was your average college student a couple years ago, and didn't really have any idea what the NDAA was, didn't really know anything that was going on in this country. And I blame my friend who showed me Stumble Upon. Not sure if anybody's familiar with Stumble Upon. It is the greatest procrastination tool in the history of existence.
I've never heard of it.
It just stumbles random links for you. So I threw politics in there as one of my interests. And I came across a link on current.com called 61 Senators Betrayed You Today. It was a link to a video. I was kind of curious, like, well, what would this mean? And so I decided to watch the video. I remember looking at that video with my jaw open. Like, this is happening in America. It's happening here in my country. The land of the free and home of the brave. This happens. See, I'd studied World War II. I knew the rise and fall of the Third Reich and what happened there. I knew the Japanese detention, 110,000 Japanese Americans were detained during World War II. I knew all of this stuff. And to see this actually getting put into law in America was shocking to me. So I eventually picked my brain up off the floor and started to do some research into it. I want to be on the right side of this issue eventually. So I'm going to do some research on this. So I started looking into these sections. I did about a month and a half of research. And on January 3rd, I decided that this is it. That this is the most dangerous threat to America. And I'll tell you what, I may be young, but I've always been kind of a forward thinker. And I see some young guys in the audience as well. I'm glad you're here. And I've always been kind of a forward thinker. And so I'm thinking about what kind of a world are my children going to grow up in under the NDAA? Do I want to live in the world where there's someone standing outside my children's door with an AR-15 and military personnel and searching them as they go in and out of their house, like happened in Nazi Germany? Do I want to live in a world where there's checkpoints, like happened in Soviet Russia? Do I want to live in a world where the NKVD, who's familiar with NKVD?
It's a Soviet thing, isn't it?
Soviet secret police.
That's right, yep.
They passed a law like the NDAA in Russia. And the NKVD, it was started to point at the Russian version of terrorists. I forget who it was, the Serbs, or I'm not sure exactly who the Russians were targeting. And it was pointed at them, but it eventually expanded until the NKVD had a quota. So they would walk around the streets of Russia, and if they saw you, they'd detain you because they had a quota of people to detain that day. So it also kind of brought back those. I'm like, well, I don't even have to be in activism. I don't even have to say anything. I just have to run over their eyes, and they just detain me. So I decided that's enough. My dad and my mother, who really thank them for it, they homeschooled